everybody. Welcome back to I'm Not Crazy. It's Cameron.
And Nicole.
Sorry for the absence. We got married. We've been trying to buy a house. You know, we've been doing real life shit, unfortunately.
Adult things.
Yeah, things we do not want to do. But hey, we're back in the studio. We're back at it. And today we're talking about sleep paralysis. Have you ever had an experience with sleep paralysis?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you might be wondering, why are we doing this? Because it's technically more of a medical thing. So for a brief description here, what is sleep paralysis? Sleep paralysis is a feeling of being conscious but unable to move. It occurs when a person passes between stages of wakefulness and sleep. During these transitions, you may be unable to move or speak for a few seconds up to a few minutes. And on top of that, people also have auditory and visual hallucinations that we'll get into on top of that. So this just seems like a crazy medical condition, right? So you might be asking, why are we featuring this? So what makes this phenomenon of interest to us are the horrifying symptoms and its causes, as well as the common malevolent figures that are seen by experiencers. We'll also be looking into the past. The sleep disorder has been mistaken and to help create legends for creatures like incubus, succubus, vampires, demons, witches, and more. So this has a link to quite a few spooky, scary things.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I mean, I guess in my family's, I don't want to say like culture because maybe it doesn't go across the board. But usually when people feel sleep paralysis, they usually like to affiliate it with a ghost or a demon sitting on your chest. Like that feeling.
That is the common theme.
Yeah.
So we will find it does stretch throughout pretty much every culture for a pretty far back in history. I mean, it's a common sleep thing, so everyone's tried to place the causality on it, and it's usually, back in the day, something spooky, scary. What triggers sleep paralysis? One major cause of sleep paralysis is sleep deprivation, or the lack of sleep. Changes in sleep schedule, stress, and sleep-related problems might also play a role. That makes sense. There are two kinds of sleep paralysis. In medical literature, there are two commonly used categorized cases of sleep paralysis: isolated and recurrent sleep paralysis. Isolated sleep paralysis is when the episodes are not connected to an underlying diagnosis of narcolepsy or just sleep apnea, any other just like already pre-diagnosed sleeping disorder that you may have. So it's just these isolated incidents where it happens to you, me, like happens to just random people. And recurrent sleep paralysis involves multiple episodes over time. And in many cases, these two defining characteristics are combined to describe a condition of recurrent isolated sleep paralysis, RISP, which involves ongoing instances of sleep paralysis where someone doesn't have any underlying sleep disorder that is the causality.
I wonder if, remember that dream that I told you I kept having that was like reoccurring where I just would wake up and then it just kept happening like over and over again, but it was in the same sleep cycle, and then I woke up and I felt like I was choking. But it's also probably correlated to the fact that I work third shift, I don't sleep, and
yeah, yours is most definitely sleep deprivation and stress for sure, but I mean that's what does it. So I mentioned the horrifying symptoms. So what are these symptoms? First and foremost, you are completely paralyzed, as the name would imply.
Yeah. And
you have zero control of your body. Sometimes your eyes will remain shut, but other times your eyes will be open and you're aware of your surroundings, just unable to do anything other than move your eyes. So people will also feel like something is pushing you down, like someone or something is in the room, a feeling of fear. Hypnagogic or hypnoponic experiences, which are described as hallucinations, either audio or visual.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are all pretty terrifying things. I have had one of these experiences, so I do need to elaborate on this list of symptoms a little bit to paint a better picture of what these hallucinations in the presence feel like in the room. I mean, you obviously know you've had some, but for people that might not, so people commonly see the same figures when experiencing this, which is odd. They are the shadow people, which are dark black contours of people like you'd imagine. The old hag, who's a witch-like character. The Hat Man, who's a shadow person specifically.
I've heard of the Hat Man before.
With a fancy hat, sometimes a long coat or a cape. Then also just demonic entities or aliens, just kind of creatures that don't seem entirely human. So is this some kind of primal fear in our DNA that we all share from our caveman days, to fear certain predators, or like some weird connection to the collective unconsciousness that we're all sharing these same basic fears? Or are we actually just perceiving visitors in our room? To me, if people were having hallucinations and nightmarish experiences, I feel like they would vary more instead of having the exact same specific characters for everybody for the most part. I mean, there are some that are more specified, but those are very common tropes for a good majority of these, which is creepy. So there currently isn't any cure or treatment to prevent sleep paralysis beside getting plenty of sleep and limiting stress, which is terrifying.
Impossible.
Yeah, that's all you can do. But this is far from a new phenomenon. As with most understood matters of science, this sleep disorder has been interpreted by all cultures all over the world as visiting by demons, spirits, aliens, ghosts, what have you.
Yeah.
So real quickly, I would just like to tell you my experience with sleep paralysis. I've only had one kind of true experience. It was a similar situation. I was doing 2-a-day practice for football. Mm-hmm. So you wake up in the morning, you have practice, have a few hours break, go back for the afternoon.
Absolute misery.
So this was in between one of my naps in the 2-a-days. So it was after the morning practice, and I just had like 2 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. And I remember just waking up in my room. Harry Potter 3, like the title menu was just playing on my TV.
Classic.
Classic me falling asleep to Harry Potter. But I just could not move at all. My eyes were open and I could look around the room. But then I began to hear like whispering in both of my ears, but it was like coming from all around the room and it was multiple people. Like it sounded like a crowd just like all murmuring, like growing in volume.
Interesting.
And then I slowly felt something walking up my legs and it felt like it was pushing me like at least a foot into the bed. And like it hurt too. It felt like something was like grabbing onto me and shoving me into my mattress, and it climbed all the way up until it was just laying on my chest.
Yeah.
And this entire time also my head was like looking to the left and it was sideways. So I actually wasn't like getting a view of what was walking up the bed because I couldn't move. I could just see Harry Potter and I could just hear like, well, the whispering also began to rise into, it sounded like people were just screaming in my ears and like not necessarily a language, but just it sounded like a chorus of screams while something really heavy climbed up me, pushing me into the mattress, and then it got on my chest and I couldn't breathe. And I'd say I was probably in that state trying to scream for about 15 seconds before I just like jerked forward, tore ass out of my room, told my parents and everyone, and they're like, you're bullshit. That was a nightmare. And no one believed me. I mean, obviously now people have heard of sleep paralysis and things, but it scared the shit out of me. I was pretty confident my room was haunted after that.
I think I've probably had 2 experiences of sleep paralysis. And one was when we lived in our old apartment. And I think that apartment was haunted anyways, because I would hear crazy things in the middle of the night that would like wake me up in dead sleep. Like the closet would make very loud banging noises, whatever. So, but it was the one that I told you where I was like I was asleep, mm-hmm. and then I felt like something was crawling on the bed, but it had weight to it, and I was like, it can't be a cat. But I couldn't wake up, and then I heard the growling in my ear, and I was like, fuck this.
That's classic sleep paralysis. I would say you've had a few scenarios.
Yeah, and then the other one was the most recent one where I was having just a reoccurring dream, and then I was waking up because I heard you saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And the look of like sheer fear in your eyes in my dream like freaked me the fuck out, and I just couldn't breathe.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
See, that is something we will look at, that a lot of people theorize that maybe because we're in between sleep and like, reality and our consciousness is floating, could this be an out-of-body experience? Are we actually witnessing spirits and ghosts or demons and other things, aliens, multidimensional beings in our room? And these are actual things. So we're going to break this down.
That's so weird though.
I'd quickly like to just give you the original definition of nightmare. It is an evil spirit formerly thought to oppress people during sleep. A frightening dream that usually awakens the sleeper. Something such as an experience, situation, or object having the monstrous character of a nightmare or producing feeling of anxiety or terror. So that is the classic definition of a nightmare, was an evil spirit sleeping on your chest, essentially.
Okay.
I talked about the night hag. We're going to start by breaking down some of these common characters seen during sleep paralysis, and this one to me is kind of the most frightening.
The night hag one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the night hag, or old hag, is the name given to a supernatural creature commonly associated with the phenomenon of sleep paralysis, where a person feels a presence of a supernatural, malevolent being which immobilizes the person as if sitting on their chest or on the foot of their bed.
Which is what I've heard a lot.
And which is what I've experienced. The word nightmare was used to describe this phenomenon before the word received its modern, more general meaning. So various cultures have various names for this phenomenon and their supernatural character. But I mean, it's not always the night hag, but it pretty much, that nightmare thing is like similar through all cultures, but it might have different names.
Okay.
So in Scandinavian folklore, sleep paralysis is caused by a more supernatural creature related to the incubi or succubi. Mm-hmm. The mare, or is a damned woman who is cursed, and her body is carried mysteriously during sleep and without her noticing. In this state, she visits villagers to sit on their rib cages while they are asleep, causing them to experience nightmares. In Turkey, sleep paralysis is called karabasan or karabasan and is similar to other stories of the demonic visitation during sleep. A supernatural being, commonly known as a jinn, so what we've heard about before, evil genie, comes to the victim's room, holds him or her down hard enough not to allow any movement, and then starts to strangle the person.
Side note, you guys should watch Wishmaster. They talk about jinn, and it's one of my favorite scary movies.
Also, there is a very good documentary about this, but I forget what it's called. It's like, we watched it together, but it's all about people who have sleep paralysis recurring. In Chinese culture, sleep paralysis is widely known as pinyin or pinyin, I think, which literally translates into ghost pressing on body or ghost pressing on bed. So same kind of thing, spirit. In Japanese culture, sleep paralysis is referred to as kanashabiri, literally bound or fastened in metal. So the term occasionally used by English-speaking authors to refer to the phenomenon both in academic papers and pop culture literature.
Interesting.
There are hundreds of these, and we don't have time to go through every culture, but I just kind of wanted to top on some of the common themes and some of the main cultures that we've already kind of maybe touched on some other things.
Yeah.
So it's usually either a physical living person sending their spirit to torment someone, or just a cryptid creature or a malevolent ethereal being. So sometimes people are said to physically sleepwalk and visit them, in the first case of like the Scandinavian one.
Yeah.
In other cases, these night creatures are ghost of vengeful spirits, recently lost loved ones. The night hag will take the form of a witchy woman, but people have also recounted stories of sleep paralysis where a cat or other common familiars will sit on their chest. Familiar is a small animal or imp kept as a witch's attendant given to her by the devil. So let's get some stories now of people who've experienced the night hag.
Oh, I love these. Okay, go.
Black-eyed hag. It happened for the first time when I was 14. I couldn't move. I didn't understand what was happening. My most prominent time having to experience sleep paralysis was my last year while lying in bed. I fell asleep pretty quick, but then woke up with the pressure of a hand on my right shoulder. When I could turn around, I saw the old hag. She had long, craggly gray hair, a pale greenish face, long nose, and creepiest of all, her eyes were all black. She smiled at me, then took off. That's when I snapped out of my paralysis. Choking old hag. I was sleeping one night when I suddenly awoke. The room was exactly as it was when I fell asleep. I couldn't move or scream. I saw an old, scary lady standing in front of my window. She quickly moved to me and started choking me. It seemed at least like 10 minutes before she let go and disappeared, and then I could move and scream. I was terrified and would no longer sleep in that room. Evil generates from her. I'm 42 and first had a nightmare about a terrifying witch at the age of 16. She kneels on my chest and stares into my face, slowly getting nearer and nearer. I'm completely terrified. She wears a black cloak and hood. Her face is like a witch and evil generates from her, surrounds me from her. Other times I can be laying on my stomach and she will creep her hand up on the back of my head, down my face, and hook her fingers under the top of my teeth and pull my head back. Ugh. Other times she will bite, sit on the bed, knock on the door, and call my name, and generally just scare the crap out of me. How can anyone explain this? The Woman and the Reaper.
Ooh.
Old hag is misleading. To me, she appears as a beautiful woman in a long flowing white gown and veil. At times, the Grim Reaper accompanies her. It happens when I'm on my back, just before falling asleep. I've always felt that if she ever gets under the bed, I'll be gone for good. She hovers across the room and slowly comes closer. The Reaper in the black, hooded cloak stands at the foot or the side of my bed. I cannot move or speak, but can hear everything. The fear level is intense and stays with me past dawn. Nose to nose with the hag. I've been trying for about a year to induce sleep paralysis as a gateway to lucid dreaming. I heard about this phenomenon but never experienced it. Tonight was the first occurrence. I did it as I always do. Lie on my back, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the numbness to begin. It doesn't. Instead, all the noise outside my window stops, as though someone muted the world outside. I blink, and it's there, on my ceiling. It just kind of floated downward, dragging its fingers down the wall as it did. The sound was sickening. It stopped when it was nose to nose with me. Puts its other hand, it had 3 arms, on my chest and just stayed there staring at me. Its eyes glowed, cycling from a fluorescent purple to an almost ethereal red. Then someone in the room next to me dropped something, and it just levitated upward into the ceiling. Its face was the last thing to melt away. So those are just some common experiences of people who have sleep paralysis with the night hag or the old hag. I do have like a visualization, like nightmare kind of this, but I've never had like a sleep paralysis vision of the night hag, but I have had like a witchy nightmare.
Never had one either, and thank goodness I don't think I would ever want to feel the pressure of someone just pushing you into the bed, sitting on your chest, or staring at you face to face.
The staring at me face to face would just terrify me. I wouldn't be able to handle that, but the crawling up the body was very scary. I've only had one of those ever, but hope to never have them.
Yeah.
So, incubus and succubus. So we also keep coming across this reference to incubus and succubuses. So let's take a closer look. And
wait, aren't those the ones that take advantage of you while you're sleeping?
Yep.
If you know what I mean. Wink. Okay. I was gonna say nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but you went straight to the point. Okay.
An incubus is a demon in a male form that seeks to have sexual intercourse with sleeping women. The corresponding spirit in female form is called a succubus. In medieval Europe, union with an incubus was opposed by some to result in the birth of witches, demons, and deformed human offspring. So that's supposedly how we got some mythical creatures.
Cool.
I haven't mentioned it yet, but some sleep paralysis experiencers do mention a sexual aspect to it. Some people experience the sensation of sex, but this is often still accompanied with the other terrifying, oppressive feelings as well. So
are they the same people that say that they bone ghosts?
Some of these people who claim they bone ghosts are probably just having episodes of sleep paralysis is what's happening.
Okay.
Because people will feel physical intercourse sometimes because you do have different physical, auditorial, and visual hallucinations. So, it just goes into it. So the word incubus is derived from the Latin incubus, nightmare, and incubare, to lie upon, weigh upon, brood. The idea of the succubus and incubus dates back as far as the medieval and biblical times. The earliest writings date back to Mesopotamia, circa 2400 BC. It was believed that a demonic creature called Lilu or Lilitu, female form, would erotically seduce men and women in their dreams. However, the actual title of succubus, to lie beneath in Latin, and incubus, to lie on top of, were not applied to these mythical demons until medieval times, even though it dates back before that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So throughout history, it's been believed that the succubus would come at night and would sexually attack men in their sleep, retrieving their semen. They would then transform to their incubus form when they would transfer this semen into other women sleeping and impregnate them. So it's actually never spirit jisms. Sorry. It's all people's just being transferred by a ghost. So that's gross. In hopes that the woman would bear a gifted child called a cambion? I don't know. Thereby deceptively spreading their species into humankind. These creatures can allegedly drain energy, blood, and life forms from humans.
Wait, so they would take semen from one person and put it in another and hope some magical creature comes from it?
That's it, all right.
But wouldn't it still be human?
Yeah, but it got tainted with magic evil in the transfer somehow.
Great.
Transfer fees, So the basic description of succubus or incubus has remained very much the same. Described as a gargoyle-like creature with wings and a tail, horns and scaly skin. As time evolved, so did its description. In the 18th and 19th century, its description evolved into more human-like imagery. However, some people have experienced a visit from creatures still in their animalistic form, but some people also describe these as familiars, cats, other creatures as well.
Okay.
So, stories.
Oh, boy.
I've been going through this since I was a kid. It stops for a while, then will come back. Sometimes it's sexual, and sometimes they pull me somewhere. I can hear them coming, but by the time I do, it's too late and they're already there. I'm not religious at all, but when I call on Jesus or God, that helps. I used to get them so often, I would start cursing them out and yelling at them. I really wish I knew what it meant and why it happens, especially why it happens, stops, and then comes back. I've had hands grabbing me, and when I grab the hands, more hands appear. I don't see them, I just feel them. And I actually feel pain vividly from long, hard nails. Just tonight, I had an experience. My dog even jumped on the bed, and I could feel her, and my dog never jumps on the bed. I actually felt an energy that was inside my whole body, but I was flexing all my muscles to keep the energy out, but it would not leave my body. I could hear a cat purring. In all my experiences, I can't really see, I just feel. I got up several times to get my Bible from another room, but just as I opened the door, I was back in the bed again. This went on several times, kind of similar to your dream. When I was shooing them out, or whatever it was in the name of Jesus, finally a hand grabbed my crotch, and I grabbed away and held it away. It was a soft woman's hand. It would not let up or let go. The last time I went with it being, okay, maybe I shouldn't get into this because, I'm not going to read too much more of these.
I'm gonna tell you this, like having, like, the fact that she's, like, having, like, this reoccurring I don't want to say dream within a dream, but experience within
An experience over and over?
Yeah, that's like probably the most terrifying thing.
You continuously waking up in the same spot?
Yeah, and it felt so real. Like I just continuously kept waking up, and
That's
then
sleep
like
paralysis.
the moment that I realized that like this isn't real, it would take me back to square one of me just waking up in bed and doing the whole damn thing over again.
Like 1408, that John Cusack Stephen King movie.
Maybe it was trying to tell me something.
So you might have noticed that there are a lot of similarities between incubus and vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Both are oppressive beings that feed off a living person's vitals, blood, semen, air, life force, whatever, while you're sleeping.
Great.
Although we're familiar with Dracula, based off Vlad the Impaler, they share mythology between the shared mythology between the two are striking. The main differences between them being that vampires start out as human beings and are transformed, whereas incubus and succubus are demonic or ethereal creatures and have never been mortal.
Mm-hmm.
Although that gets a little tricky because they are using our semen and eggs to populate, so you know.
Yeah, my question from earlier, that like that's the part that confuses me a little bit. But...
So let's take a look at the history of vampires.
Okay.
The beginning of vampires. The story of Sekhmet, the Egyptian feline warrior goddess associated with both plague and healing, is considered by some to be the oldest vampire tales. Legend holds that the sun god Ra sent his daughter Sekhmet down to punish humankind for their disobedience. But after Sekhmet couldn't stop drinking amid her slaughter, Ra quelled her planet-quenching thirst by dyeing a bunch of beer red and rendering her unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Lilith, a 4,000-year-old Jewish figure from folklore, in some stories was Adam's wife before Eve, had a monstrous reputation in ancient Babylon. Her name derives from a Sumerian word for female demons or wind spirits, Lilitu, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say.
According to scholar J.A. Sherlock, that's a little better, via the Jewish Women's Archive, the Babylonians believed that Lilitu were hungry for victims because they had once been human. They slipped through windows in people's houses, looking for victims to take the place of their husbands and wives, whom they themselves never had.
Whoa.
The modern version that we know of the vampire really started in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, variations of the early vampire mythology proliferated across Europe with nefarious monsters, often used to explain plagues and other diseases. So as Scientific America notes, cases of rare blood disorder called porphyria, in Eastern Europe may have been the root of certain physical characteristics attributed to the vampire. Porphyria symptoms include sensitivity to light, resulting in blistering skin or burns when exposed, hallucinations, and gums that recede to give the impression of elongated teeth. Apparently, you can also get brief recovery from this illness by consuming blood.
Oh.
Yeah. And like just getting iron and, I don't know, something back in your system.
I blister in the sun.
Well, you blister from sunburns, from extreme. You need more sunblock.
I'm just being dramatic.
So this was just a dip into some ancient folklore mythologies that were used to explain this sleep disorder. So as you can see, it has, as far back to biblical roots and the start of mankind, and people are still experiencing these exact same visual, physical, and auditory hallucinations. Mm-hmm. I now want to take a look at a more recent manifestation experience, the shadow man and shadow people.
Is this the shadow man with the hat?
We'll get to him. He's specified.
Cool.
So you may have come across shadow people if you frequent paranormal investigation shows like Dead Files or Ghost Adventures.
Love those shows.
As they sound, they're dark contour shadows of humanoid figures, but not comprised of shadow. They're said to be blacker than black, almost like a void of space or light.
Okay.
Some people theorize that they are spirits or ghosts from people who have passed on, but it's also theorized that these are demonic or ethereal spirits that have always been here. Descriptions of shadowy human-like figures have appeared in folklore and religious texts throughout history and cultures. Some examples include the supernatural creatures known as jinn of ancient Islamic theology, and the shadow beings known as Nalusachito of the Native American Choctaw tribes mythology. The modernly used term shadow people was apparently coined by paranormal researcher and book author Heidi Hollis, who claims that shadow people have been around her since the beginning of time, and usually appear as dark humanoid shapes or silhouettes in her peripheral vision. Professional witch and psychic Renee Watt says, they are often thought of as ghosts or a collective of negative energy, but as is true with most paranormal phenomenon, there's no finite answer. According to Watt, shadow people can appear in different forms and may even indicate that someone is under a physical attack. Many paranormal experts also theorize that there may be a connection between shadow people and extraterrestrial life, and that these beings could be otherworldly in origin and have a correlation with an alien agenda in abductee experiences.
I think I would lean more towards the spiritual world than aliens.
Than aliens?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to find...
But I feel like a lot of things that you talk about, I always lean towards something else more than aliens.
Hey, man, aliens are always going to leak their way into the conversation.
I know.
But this one actually is a little interesting that we will have a connection in a bit, that it seems like a lot of people's abduction stories might also just be cases of sleep paralysis, where, because another common thing is feeling like essentially you're on an examination table and people are poking and prodding at you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people theorize that a good amount of alien abduction stories that happen in your bed in sleep is just a really bad case of sleep paralysis where you're feeling very painful things that seem very real. So
it's in our collective subconscious, basically.
Yeah, it's just another one of these figures that we can't explain why it keeps coming to this unless it's happening. So others think that shadow people are harbingers for bad news and pain. Mm-hmm. Because of the fear they induce on people, it is believed that they feed off the very fear that they're creating. There are also a lot of accounts of shadow people hanging around in oppressive places and homes of abuse and dangerous people as well. So they seem to
because of the energy.
Yeah, well, it seems like they prefer hanging in a downer situation like Dementors from Harry Potter. So let's hear some stories.
Okay.
The wolf figure. I remember hearing a roaring sound in my ears and seeing a shadowy figure standing in the middle of my room, either saying my name and laughing or just watching me. It was so real. I refused to sleep as a child, but whenever I told my mom, she didn't take me seriously until it started chasing me. I could move at first and I would run around my room screaming and crying. As I got older, it started to paralyze me and I couldn't move apart from my eyes. I switched rooms because I thought it was the room, but it started to happen in that room too. But now it was a wolf-type figure, and it was on my chest. I felt safer sleeping in other people's houses, so I basically lived at my friend's house over that summer, until it started happening there. Since then, it happened almost every week for 2 years.
Jesus.
I've had 3 to 4 times. I saw a black shadow-like person with no clear shape, sitting next to my bed, near my legs on the desk beside my bed. I can't talk or move. Then I focus and try to pull myself out and say prayers. I once saw it go out my window and vanish into the air.
Mm-hmm.
The Hat Man. So now we're going to break down this more specified shadow person.
Okay.
So there is a specific shadow person that many people see with distinct characteristics. It appears to be a man wearing a trench coat or cape with an old fancy brimmed hat, often described as a top hat or fedora. What is odd about this one is that while some of the hallucinations with sleep paralysis could be explained with primal fears and instinctual fears locked in our DNA, such as like demonic creatures and even the shadow people and an old hag, this seems to be more contemporary. The Hat Man may also be seen outside of sleep paralysis episodes and linked to hauntings and demonic entities terrorizing houses. Because of its distinct uniform, some people speculate that this may be an authority figure or leader among shadow people. It is often said that the Hat Man brings a more oppressive and more terrifying aura than the normal shadow person. In many cases, the Hat Man seems to be hanging around areas where there's been a lot of negative emotion taking places, such as, like we've said, households that have experienced domestic abuse, fighting, depression, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Some people believe that the Hat Man is a demon sent to bring those who are about to die to hell. Others think he's a demon. There are also accounts of people who are ill or near death who have experiences with the Hat Man stalking them. So because of this, some people theorize that he might be death or some sort of associate of the Reaper.
Interesting.
Some stories. What typically would happen was me waking up in the middle of the night, sitting up, and by the faint light of the streetlights coming in by my window, I would see him in my doorway. I remember having long conversations with him, of which I could never fully remember afterwards. I would speak, but he would respond telepathically, not even always in words, but just in feeling sometimes. I would stop talking and we'd be communicating in that silent way entirely sometimes. The only parts of the conversations I could remember bits of were things I'd said verbally, though. I would be awake, although maybe not entirely. It wasn't the same as sleep paralysis, as I was able to sit up, but when the Hat Man would disappear, I would find myself sort of snapping out of a dreamy haze. Last night was absolutely crazy. I fell asleep for an hour and woke up to the sensation of being touched on my back. Easy fix, roll over so the ghost doesn't touch my back. Fall asleep again, wake up in another hour thinking I heard someone moving around the room. Just the fan clicking and turning, back to sleep. Ended up sleeping for 2 hours, the latter half in vivid paralysis. Hat Man in full sight before me for the first time ever. Wide brim, long coat. Little bit shorter than expected. Couldn't actually see his face, just an older man with scraggly white hair. He was approaching from the closet on the other side of the bed, stepping towards my side. I managed to wake up before he got any closer, but ended up falling back asleep and right back into my paralysis. He gets inches away from choking me out with both of his hands before I wake up again, physically swinging my fist and murmuring, "No, no, 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 no," accidentally elbowing my husband. But I felt like accidentally elbowing my husband, but I felt like I managed not have the breath stolen in my sleep. I have a lot of these ones.
Wait, have you ever experienced a Hat Man situation?
I've never seen any hallucinations. I've just felt physical things and heard auditory hallucinations. But thank God, I don't.
What about the shadow thing that you used to see in our old apartment that you thought was? Oh, maybe it was.
That was when I was awake. That's I feel like just ghost spirit. I think that old house was just haunted.
Okay.
The best way I can describe it is it's like when you see there's someone in the dark and you can only make out their silhouette or shape. You can't see any color or detail and they look a little fuzzy, but you can definitely see them and you can tell that it's a person. Head, body, arms, legs. It's just too dark to see any detail. Well, picture exactly that fuzzy dark figure, but in the daytime, walking past your door. It's not a shadow on the wall or anything. It looks exactly like the above. Opaque. Can't see through them, but it's just odd to see that in the day. I recently found out about the Hat Man through a friend, and I've been freaking out ever since. This may be my attempt of using humor to cope, but I wonder if it would actually... fuck this one. I'm going to skip this one.
Okay.
So, as we're always going to do, are you ready for alien abductions?
Of course.
As far as our alien connections go to the subject matters, this one is actually the most sensical we've had in a while.
Really?
So during cases of sleep paralysis, many people claim to see alien creatures entering their room and standing above them. But this might also be connected to people see demonic creatures and just other beings. So these could just be scary demonic, like scary hallucinations, you know?
Yeah.
So they see alien creatures entering their bedroom and standing over them. Most descriptions are of the Greys, the small grayish aliens that we're familiar with, but this is also a pop culture. It's in the zeitgeist, you know. So it would make sense that would be the alien you see if you were kind of maybe putting some of your subconscious on this phenomenon. Of the Greys, so the small grayish aliens with a large head and black eyes. So what's interesting is that this sleep disorder may explain a lot of people's claims of alien abduction. Instead of feeling a weight pressing on the body, people will experience painful medical procedures, as well as feeling as though they're being transported out of their room or having an out-of-body experience. Abduction stories are strikingly similar. Victims wake to find themselves paralyzed, unable to move or cry for help. They see flashing lights and hear buzzing sounds. Electric sensations zing through their body, which may rise up, and they may rise up into levitation as well. Aliens with wraparound eyes, gray or green skin, lacking hair or noses approach them. The abductee's heart pounds violently. There's lots of probing in the alien ships, apparently, as you've heard. Instruments are inserted in their nose, navels, or other orifices. It is
their buttholes.
Painful, and oftentimes sexual intercourse is involved, which also goes into other incubus, succubus experiences as well. So then it's over after a few seconds or minutes, and the intruders vanish. Victims are back in their own beds and can move again, seeming very much like sleep paralysis. Yeah. These feelings are very similar to the experience of sleep paralysis, which makes researchers think they're one and the same. On the reverse side, ufologists question whether all these cases of sleep paralysis...
Wait, what questions it?
Ufologists, UFOologists, ufologists.
Oh, okay.
Are their term. Sorry.
I was like, what is that?
Ufologists, on the reverse, question whether all cases of sleep paralysis are actually just alien or interdimensional visitors and still doing these experiments on us, but we're only able to, much like we've said before, on trying to see into another dimension, looking through a keyhole, looking at a piece of paper on the flat side, not being able to see the real picture.
Yeah.
One of those things that we're only interpreting so much.
Okay.
I've talked with this about you before, that there are a lot of cases of UFO sightings and high strangeness with events that, like, with some sleep paralysis and stuff. Well, now I got some stories for you.
More stories?
I have stories for each scenario.
Oh, God.
The Gray and the Hag. One night I left my windows open to let the breeze in. I don't remember falling asleep, but I was paralyzed when I regained awareness. I remember seeing black rain, and I could feel my body weighing 5 times its normal weight. I was sinking into the bed slightly. I turned my head and saw what looked like a gray alien smiling at me. It wasn't easy to move, but I slowly forced myself to crawl to the edge of the bed and to fall off, hopefully waking up someone in the house. I could feel its thoughts as if it was connected to mine. I wasn't supposed to be moving, was the emotion I felt from the being, but I did. I reached the edge, falling head first. When I hit the floor, I was awake in my bed, face down. Like I was when I first realized I was aware. My windows were still open and I could feel the breeze. I saw an alien who was looking at me. It had the proportions of a living person with an elongated head and gray skin, large eyes, and no nose. Aggressively minded, I remember that this was a dream, but I could not get out of the plot of the dream. That one's dumb. Little men with smooth skin and blue color, human height, and non-standard large heads and huge eyes, bulging black color. Their arms are long, their fingers were elongated, 4 fingers on each hand. I went up, and the phrase, "Don't be afraid." These are all bad stories. I don't like these ones.
I feel like, not trying to knock anyone who's had alien experiences, but usually the stories aren't. I mean, for me, they don't do it for me. That's all I'm going to say.
In my lucid travels, I've been on gray alien ships at least 3 times that I can recall. White ceilings, walls, and floors. Bright white lighting everywhere, no shadows. Very minimalistic and simple. There's a wall with a big floor-to-ceiling window that's over 10 feet long, and you can clearly see the night sky and stars. 2 times I woke up on a metallic table, motor cortex disabled so you can't move. The Greys reading your thoughts to communicate with you through telepathy. One time I woke up standing in a line with other people near the large window. Motor cortex disabled so you can't move. Woman behind me freaking out but unable to move as well, but I could hear her crying. We were waiting to be sent back. My initial experience around the age of 7, I was terrified because I couldn't move, and the inability to move is what freaked me out the most. In later years, I actually felt a sense of family from these beings, more so than I ever felt from my own family. Well, sounds like he had problems at home.
Yeah.
Out-of-body experiences. Another common feature of sleep paralysis is the out-of-body experience, or astral projection. In this state, your consciousness leaves your physical body and is able to observe your surroundings, and in some cases, remote viewing travel around the world in your ethereal body. You may have heard of out-of-body experiences with other things like meditation and drug trips and things of that sort. It is also commonly felt after extreme physical exertion, near-death experiences, sensory deprivation, or overload and extreme G-force. Apparently, people who fly jet planes have issues of out-of-body experiences briefly.
Terrifying.
Yeah, that's not a time when you want to pop up. During cases of sleep paralysis, many people still feel overwhelming fear as well as seeming a tormenting figure in their bedrooms, shadow people, hat man, aliens, what have you. And in some episodes, experiences report an urgency to return to their bodies before these creatures can either get inside or possibly kill them. If this sounds familiar, like the plot to A Nightmare on Elm Street, that's because the plot of the movie was taken right from a horrifying true story involving multiple people dying mysteriously in their sleep. The basis of the film was inspired by several newspaper articles printed in the Los Angeles Times in the 1970s about some refugees who, after fleeing the United States because of war and genocides in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, suffered disturbing nightmares and refused to sleep. Some of the men died in their sleep soon after. Medical authorities called the phenomenon Asian death syndrome. The condition afflicted men between the ages of 19 and 57 and was believed to be the sudden unexplained syndrome of Brugada syndrome. So that is actually where Wes Carpenter got the plot idea for Nightmare on Elm Street, and then obviously took a lot of liberties. But then he did lead into some sleep deprivation. A lot of people actually kind of look at Nightmare on Elm Street as a sleep deprivation tale because it does have a lot of those tropes of the claws, the pain, and kind of a haggy character. So some stories. Last night when I fell asleep, I was in a dream with my friends, and they were all sitting at the top of a double-decker bus. There are no stairs and I couldn't climb, so one of my friends reached out her hand to pull me across. And as soon as she grabbed my hand, it felt like something entered through my hand, like a demon. It felt like I let go through my arm and all around my body. My whole body began to vibrate. It felt like I was having a seizure, and everything was blurry, and it began flashing from her hands digging into my hand on the bus and back to me in my room. This is confusing. Then my legs were floating off the bed and up the wall, and something grabbed my head and twisted it and shoved it into my pillows so I couldn't see properly, but I still felt my legs being pulled up the wall. When I was in my room, I couldn't tell if I was asleep or hallucinating, or if some demon was actually there. Years ago, I fell asleep on the living room floor. I always slept on the floor. After I had taken some strong medications. In the middle of the night, I suddenly felt a pressure on my chest, kind of like something was on top of me. I opened my eyes and I saw a human figure with a black hood. I looked at its face and it was morphing into all types of horrifying monsters. It was on the side of me and sucking my life force out of my chest.
Jeez.
I was terrified. I couldn't move or talk. I was so scared. I was desperately trying to wake myself up and ended up floating up to the ceiling. The demon was looking at me like it couldn't believe I did that. Finally, I fell back into my body and woke up. I screamed and ran into my mother's room to sleep in her bed, so I was not alone. I have a lot more of these, but I'm going to skip them.
Okay.
The contagion, or the spread. Another odd feature of the sleep disorder is the fact that it is seemed to be able to spread by mentioning it or talking about it with people.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, everybody. People who experience frequent bouts of sleep paralysis report that they are more likely to have an episode if they talk about it or have thought about it that day. Beyond thinking yourself into an episode, I've come across multiple accounts of friends or significant others also suffering from sleep paralysis after continued time spent with another sufferer. There are also many accounts of people who are wide awake witnessing shadow-like people while people are having sleep paralysis episodes. This is something that I could see falling into a bit of both categories, science and the unknown. So there is little known about the human mind, and that there are theories about our consciousness existing outside of our bodies already, and our brains are acting more like antennas or receivers to interpret data, right?
Okay.
So along with these concepts, with things like the collective consciousness or the Akashic records, could we be having shared experiences with the people as well as interacting with unknown creatures from different parallels or dimensions, actually?
I can believe that.
Yeah, I could see this being a little bit of what's happening.
Yeah.
A quick look at the Akashic records for some context. In the religion of Theosophy, I don't know, and the philosophical school called Anthroposophy, I don't know. The Akashic records are all of universe's events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent that have ever occurred in the past, present, or future. In terms, it's like encoded on a non-physical plane of existence known as the mental plane. So basically, it's, if we were talking computer sense, it's the storage and the code of all history and events.
Okay.
I think after you die, your essence would be just downloaded to the hard drive, and it's all shared on one server, essentially, is the thought of what our afterlife might be.
Okay.
So to end this out, I have stories from people who have shared experiences of seeing shit. Oh, nope, I haven't even talked about ghosts yet.
Ghosts?
Yeah, this is going to go on forever. Sorry, everybody.
No way!
She strangled my girlfriend.
Oh.
I was awakened by my screaming girlfriend. She had her arms up as if she was pushing something off her. Her eyes were wide open as if she was awake. I called her names a few times and tried to shake her awake. Then her eyes closed and she went back to sleep. When I woke her up again, she told me she was fighting an old lady that was trying to strangle her. Last night I was awakened by something. I had no idea what it was, but I had the strong feeling telling me that I should turn around and look at my girlfriend. As I turned around, I saw what looked like an old person's face moving away from me. At that exact moment, my girlfriend let out a small scream and went back to sleep. So did I. I would not go back to sleep.
Fuck that.
This morning when we woke up, the first thing my girlfriend told me was, I had a dream about the old lady again last night. What are the odds that both of us would see her the same night? Was it a person or a spirit? Why did she move away from me? Simultaneous experiences. In December 2007, my wife and I were sleeping in bed when I knew I felt my wife was being attacked. I woke to find a shadow person on top of her choking her. I jumped out of bed and shared several French profanities with it. As I moved toward it to confront it, it moved away into the wall. I turned to see my wife still choking and woke her. She stated that she had dreamt that she was being choked by a person on top of her. Normally you would dismiss it, but how do two people have simultaneous experiences? She would later have a similar experience in the army where her roommate woke to see a person choking her.
Wow.
My wife and I both saw her. I've had various experiences of sleep paralysis. I've seen my bed covers pushed down over my face, unable to move or shout. A female voice has hissed in my ear, bringing feelings of terror. Once I saw the old woman looking at me through the bed covers. She was gray and had a menacing grin. I started hitting the covers where this misty gray face was staring from. My wife woke up at this point and screamed, saying that she saw the woman's face too. I think there's more to it than just scientific explanation. I think it's part physical and part supernatural. I think our brains pick up a more expansive signal when we're between sleep and awake. From Matt. Hair-pulling hag. A week ago, I was awakened in the middle of the night by the sound I thought was my husband's voice saying, "She has my hand." He sometimes mumbles in his sleep, but it's never coherent and hasn't happened in a long time. I was lying with my head resting on his forearm, so I immediately opened my eyes and saw his hand wasn't moving or anything. Suddenly, at the same time, an enormous pressure covered my face to the point that I couldn't breathe or open my mouth. At this point, I had the feeling of a hand pressing down on the top of my head and pulling my hair so hard I felt physical pain. I began to scream but couldn't open my mouth for several seconds. Finally, the pressure stopped and it was over. I want to brush this off as a nightmare, but I can't figure out why I felt the pain when I was definitely conscious afterwards. And my eyes were wide open the entire time. When I looked at my husband, he was in a deep sleep.
I think I would hate to have, one of these experiences with my eyes open.
I did on mine. It wasn't fun. It was. Would you rather not know what's going on around you though, and just hear and feel stuff?
I think so. I feel like I would be more terrified having my eyes open and then being aware that I can't.
With whatever it is.
Well, making eye contact with whatever it is, but then aside from that, not being able to do anything about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, regardless, you won't be able to do anything about it though.
I know, but I think I would, if I was able to see like whatever was going on and not being able to do anything about it, I think maybe. I would, yeah.
Ghost. Another explanation for these nighttime visitors is something a little less evil. Could these shadows, creatures, and people actually be the spirits of the dead tormenting or haunting the living? A lot of descriptions from sleep paralysis would depict an old woman or children or people in period clothing. If we were actually between states of consciousness, is perceiving the actual world without the use of our bodies, is it so unreasonable that we may also be seeing the ethereal beings of similar substances? Mm-hmm. I'm not a very religious person, as I've said many times. Religion to me is the politicization of spirituality. Just be spiritual. I have no idea what happens to us after we die, but I am open to the concept maybe of our consciousness or living spirit moving on afterwards, or having some sort of record like the Akashic record we were talking about existing, or like, Matrix situation. But in either of those scenarios, I would still imagine a possibility where our consciousness might like momentarily break from our physical thing and, perceive ghosts or spirits or something like that. So yeah, I could see this being part of the explanation of what it is. I sure hope it's not demons. Stories. It happens every time I fall asleep on my back. I wake up and I can't tell if my eyes are open or shut, but I can see my whole room. Different one.
But the same title?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same beginning.
Okay.
A dark presence is lurking on top of my wardrobe, and as soon as I notice it and I try to scream, I can't, and I can't move. The darkness slithers down the side of my wardrobe, across the floor, and looms over the end of my bed. Then it creeps over me, trying to invade every orifice. I feel an immense pressure like it has pinned me down and is pushing its way into my ears, eyes, and mouth. The darkness then screams a terrible screech into my face, and I try to scream back until eventually I manage to jerk my head and everything disappears. I'm alone in the darkness. I get sleep paralysis.
That one was very similar to the other one.
The other ones? Yeah. Well, because they're very similar stories most of the time. I get sleep paralysis quite a lot, but you never get used to it. It's just an intense pressure holding you down. I can't speak. I can usually see the shadow of a dark figure out of the corner of my eye, but I can't turn my head to look at it. That's pretty terrifying. Luckily for me, my partner is now used to this and we have a code. I start breathing really quick and loudly, and he notices. He snaps me out of it. I get it when I haven't had too much sleep. The only time I was really freaked out was when I thought I could hear chatter in the background. Then I could feel someone laying next to me, sleeping. The quilt just moved with each breath. I could feel the weight behind me in bed, snoring. I started to panic as I knew no one was in the house. Eventually I woke up and moved back slightly to feel there was no one there. The first time it happened to me was when I went for a nap during the day. I was laying on my side, facing away from the door, when I woke up to the sound of the door closing. I tried to turn around to see what had come through the room, but I couldn't move. My eyes were wide with terror. I could see everything in my room, and I heard this thing walk around. And then it sat on my bed, and I could feel the bed dip from its weight. It then shuffled toward me, and it felt like it began to spoon me. It was extremely tall. I was trying to move so hard, but I was lying still. The thing started to breathe on my neck and tickle my back. It then stood up and left after a few minutes. This was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me.
Fuck that.
So those are pretty... Well, I have a few more stories, but that's pretty much it. I'll wrap it up for there. But it is an odd phenomenon. I mean, there is some science to this. It does seem to be just an odd period where we're between consciousness, but that to me does open the opportunity for some of these strange...
But it's also interesting that people are saying that there are a lot of physical factors to it, too.
That's true. A lot of people are feeling physical things, be it sexual or pain. It's usually one of those two, it seems, or a combination of both. Mm-hmm. Out of any of those theories, do any of them seem a more likely candidate to you?
I think, just from what I was told since I was a child, I would like to think that it's something connected with the spiritual world, for sure. Again, aliens is just on the bottom of my list.
It could be, though. Some people think aliens are interdimensional beings, so couldn't it be but some of the same?
But I like to think otherwise.
I sure hope it's fake, because I had the good old-fashioned demonic crawling up your body hearing. I heard in mine what people a lot of these stories, what I didn't get to, describe as hearing the screams of hell, where it just sounds like a chorus of people yelling in agony in your ears. And that's what I had, while something was like growling and pushing me into my bed.
I just had the growling, and I felt... It felt like as if like it was a mammal, because it had like
big,
and like 4 legs. Like I literally thought it was a cat, but I was like, there's no way that's not even the strides of a cat.
Well, let us know what you think, or if you've had an experience with sleep paralysis out there, write us and let us know about your experience. We'd love to hear about it.
I would love to hear about it.
We'd love to. But thank you for listening to our episode on sleep paralysis. If you like what you heard, make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review on your favorite podcast app. As always, if you like what you heard, make sure you check out everything from the Majestic Jam Network, I'm Not Crazy, Cult Classics Podcast, Urban Hermit, and we'll check you on the next one.
Bye.